Welcome to this edition of the Winning Pitch broadcast. My guest today is Vicky Benzing, who's had an amazing life. She flies airplanes, she competes in airplanes. She's also a very successful business person. And we're going to roll into this at the gradient that this works for our audience. So, Vicky, tell me about who you are today.
Well, I'm an aerobatic pilot and I'm an air race pilot. I'm a skydiver. I pretty much like everything that has to do with aviation and being up in the air.
Okay.
I wasn't always this person. I started out studying chemistry and got my Ph.D. in chemistry and worked in the semiconductor industry for many, many years. But I realized that my real passion lay in aviation.
Are you still
aviation and science? And
are you still involved in the business, or are you only focused on your aviation passion at this time?
no, I'm no longer involved in the business. I mean, I follow the technology because I think it's fascinating, but I retired from the business in 2012.
All right, so let's go back and talk from the business. Why were you successful in your business ventures?
I would say that it's not because I'm special. It's because I worked really, really hard.
Got it.
And I think that anyone can make up for whatever it is they lack. And I always like to say, God only gives you so many gifts. And if you get endowed in certain areas, you might be deprived in other areas. But you can certainly make up for anything by working hard. And I worked hard. I worked hard since I was a kid in school.
So let's go back to the point where you're a kid in school. What taught you, or what got you to accept the discipline of working hard?
I don't know. I was always one of those people who wanted to achieve the next goal.
Okay.
And maybe it was just, I just wanted to be better and better. And I'm a very goal-oriented person. So grades on my report card were the goal when I was in school, and then later, college and graduate school. And I did a postdoctoral, research.
Well, it's someplace you had to go to work. So when did that occur?
I thought I was going to be a professor, but I ended up I went to Davis for undergraduate and I went to Cal for graduate school. So I'm a born and bred California girl.
Okay.
And I went up to Oregon for a postdoc. I worked for a woman who had been a graduate student at Berkeley, and she was teaching at Bryn Mawr, and she moved to the University of Oregon. She hired 3 postdocs. She had $1 million in grant money. And the 3 of us went up there and we set up her lab. And we did experiments on laser surface interaction. And while I was in Oregon, I fell in love with Oregon. And I didn't really want to leave to be, if you're on the tenure track to be a professor, you could end up anywhere in the United States. And I didn't really want to leave Oregon. And one of my buddies up at Tektronix in Portland called me up and said, hey, we have an opening at Tektronix, come apply. So I did. And I got.
So what was your first job at Tektronix?
I worked on the laser trimming of thin film resistors.
So I heard all the words you said, but it was like speaking Greek. So explain it to an old duffer like me in terms of understanding.
So on an integrated circuit or a chip, like a chip that would be in your phone,
okay.
There are resistors. And in this case, these were analog devices. So they had to be able to change the resistance value of the resistor. And to do that, the resistors were square. And to do that, the laser cut a line in the resistor. And so the current path would have to go around that line. So to create, it increased the resistance.
Okay, got it.
So, so we would actively test the circuit while the laser started cutting into the nichrome resistor until the circuit was perfect. And then it got shipped. So my job, because I worked in optics and lasers and that kind of stuff, was to design the thin film stack of dielectrics that went over the resistor and ensure that the laser trim process worked correctly. And, and I did that for a while, and then I got to move upstairs into the wafer fabrication facility where they make
with Tektronix, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So Tektronix had its own in-house wafer fabrication facility, and so we made the chips that went into the oscilloscopes and all the tests and measurement equipment that Tektronix built.
Okay.
And so I learned most aspects of building an integrated circuit. And there's hundreds of process steps to build a circuit.
Okay.
And I learned a lot about all the process steps. And later they sold our division at Tektronix, and I left when they announced the sale and went across the river to Camas, Washington, and worked at Sharp Microelectronics in their research lab.
Okay.
Now, this is where serendipity comes into play.
So tell us about the serendipity. We always like to hear about
the person that I worked for at Tektronix, the general manager there, he left when they sold the division, and he went to a company called Novella Systems in San Jose.
Okay.
And I worked for him, and I was one of his, what they call high potential engineers. And I had left to go over to Sharp, and he pestered me to join Novellus. So I was at Sharp for only a year before I was spirited away to Novella Systems. And
so you went from Tektronix to Novella, and then you went
to Sharp.
And both those situations were in Oregon.
So Tektronix was in Portland, and Sharp was across the river in Washington.
Okay. So where did you go when you went to the other company?
To Novellus. Well, because I didn't want to leave Oregon, my first job at Novellus was to support Intel in Oregon. Okay. And Intel has all of their research and development labs up in the Portland area. Okay. And so I went to support Novellus equipment, which I had worked on while I was at Sharp. I went to work on that equipment at Intel, supporting Novellus. Okay. So I was embedded within the Intel infrastructure, but I worked for a different company. And in fact, I didn't even get down to Novellus till I had worked there for like 9 months. Really? It was almost so like
there was a point that you left Oregon and went to San Jose.
No. I worked for another year there. And then, of course, I got this call, come to San Jose, we have a bigger job for you. Okay. And so I moved down to San Jose, and I took a job as a director of technology for one of the products. Okay. And what was the product? It was a tungsten deposition. So we deposited tungsten films on these silicon wafers. Okay. And then the Friday before I was supposed to start, the general manager of the division left and went to Applied Materials. And so
is that the same general manager who encouraged you to join?
No, different one. So the general manager in Tektronix became the CEO at Novellus. Okay. And so I had the group for a while before they hired another general manager. So I went from just an engineer to leading the whole group. And it was the first time I'd been to Canada and Mexico, but the first time I had to go out of the country. The first trip I took, I went to Korea to sell our equipment to Samsung. And then I continued on around the world to visit customers in Europe and IBM on the East Coast. And yeah, that was the first trip I had ever been out of the country. And in the beginning of many trips.
That was a sales trip, right?
Sales trips, yeah. So
So
because the
why did you
technology,
feel confident enough to do sales?
well, because the technology is pretty intense, you
Okay.
can't have salespeople who aren't technical people.
Okay.
You have to be a technical person,
All right.
and to be able to explain how your equipment works and what it can do, and to sell your equipment. And we're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment. It's these pieces of equipment are $1 to $6 million a piece.
Right.
So, so, anyways, it was, uh, and then after that, I became the product general manager,
Okay.
general manager for the product, um, and then I got moved to be in charge of the Intel account. And we sold into Intel. We're only selling one product into Intel, and during the time I ran the account, we sold 2 more products into Intel. And it was just at the time that they were transitioning from aluminum wiring on the chips
Okay.
to copper wiring on the chips. So we sold in copper electroplating equipment, we sold in dielectric deposition equipment, and I can remember the first $100 million order coming off the fax machine. I was staggered.
Were you excited or not?
Oh yeah, very excited.
So you went to the boss and said, "Look what I did," right?
That's right. Yeah,
And what did the boss say?
For that, I got promoted to be a vice president.
Awesome.
And I was vice president of technology, and I did that for a while, and then the boss liked to move me around quite a bit.
Do you know why?
Because I don't know why. That was what he did with us. So
Did you like that lifestyle?
it was pretty tiring, to be honest, because everything I got moved into had to be fixed.
I completely understand.
Yeah.
Are you good at fixing things?
Um, I guess I am. I mean, I have a couple personal beliefs about managing. One of them is that I hire the absolutely best people I can hire. If I can hire people that are better than me, that is terrific. I definitely strive to hire the very best, and I'll promote them, and give them credit where credit's due, um, and I try to inspire my employees to go beyond what they think they can do.
What gave you the confidence to be able to make those kinds of decisions?
What gave me the confidence?
Yeah.
In every decision I would make in the company, I would think about myself standing in front of the CEO and justifying it. so, so it was pretty easy. If it was the right thing to do for the company and I could justify it, then that's what I did. Yeah, and so for example, the Intel organization, not only did we sell into Intel, but we also shipped all that equipment all over the world, including, all the way out to Israel. And we had to create field offices all over the world and staff all those field offices and train all those employees and to service the equipment. So it became a huge, huge job. I would travel and visit each of my teams at each of the Intel fabs, and there are a lot of them around the world, regularly, just to make sure that they knew they were part of the mothership, that they weren't out there on an outpost on their own. And so I think.
Were you always this confident, high-level producer from the time you were in high school?
I would say that I strove to be.
Okay.
I strove to be, yeah. I mean, I think everybody gets knocked down sometimes in their life.
Okay.
When I was in as an undergraduate in chemistry, I was there were only 8 chem grads, but I was one of the top people there. And I thought it wasn't, particularly hard. And then I went to grad school in Berkeley and I was like, oh my God, everybody's smart here.
Yeah.
All the professors, I mean, there's lots of Nobel laureates and I found myself just being average. And so I think that was a very humbling experience. But then again, when I got out of Berkeley and went to the University of Oregon, people said, oh, you were a Berkeley grad in chem. Because Berkeley's one of the best chemistry schools in the US. And so that opened a lot of doors for me.
Excellent.
And I was able to build that lab up from scratch and start the research from scratch and publish a bunch of papers. And that gave me a lot of self-confidence that I didn't otherwise have.
Right.
And I guess I would have to say also that during my graduate school years, I learned to fly and I learned to jump out of airplanes. And both of those things gave me confidence, gave me much more confidence. The fact that, I could jump out of an airplane and save my own life, or I could be up in the sky by myself and go from point A to point B and land the airplane and all that. Those give a young person a lot of confidence. So,
okay. So can you, if you went back to the time that, let's say that you were in the 2nd or 3rd grade, did you have that same level of confidence or did you just have it as a goal? How did it work out for you?
well, I would say maybe not so much. I was really a tomboy, so I wasn't. I spent more time playing baseball with the boys and not so much time with the girls, and so that kind of made me not part of the group.
Got it.
And then, yeah, I think everybody has a hard time in grade school and high school fitting in. But I got into a program that they had in California where they call it an MGM program. It was mentally gifted minors. MGM.
Okay.
Yeah, it's mentally gifted minors, and they separated a group of us, maybe I don't know. There's 15 of us or something in my high school class of 800. And we all went through the same classes together. Okay. We had AP history. I had 2 years of chemistry in high school. So in a lot of ways, we were sequestered nerds that were away from the rest of the school population. But I always felt like, I don't know, like I wasn't one of the cool kids. Not until I got to college and started coming out of my shell more.
So what caused you coming out of the shell more? I think you went from being a sequestered nerd, using your language. Yeah. What caused that transition to where now all of a sudden you're thinking about flying airplanes and jumping out of airplanes and developing more confidence? Because it seems to me the way that you describe it, that those all kind of occurred in the same period of your life.
Yeah, I don't know if there was any one thing or turning point, but it was certainly the freedom of getting to go to college and being on your own and exploring so many different things that college has to offer. I worked in the viticulture and enology department. I was their local chemist, doctoring the wines for wine tasting groups. I was a disc jockey at the KDVS, the little campus radio station. I played intramural softball, floor hockey. I explored and kind of came out of my shell. So I think that was just maybe a natural progression of growing up. Plus, between high school and college, I grew like 3 or 4 inches.
So not only in the esoteric sense of growing up, you grew up. You got taller.
Yeah, later when I was at Novellus, one of my high school girlfriend's brothers came to work for me.
Okay.
And he looked at me, he was like, what happened to you? You're much taller than I remember you.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'7". I think I was probably 5'3" in high school. So yeah. I grew it a lot of different ways.
Perfect, perfect. So I'm going to ask you a couple of off the wall questions, and these are questions that I typically ask people during interviews. So this is my foundation. So taking into account all of your work history and all the various things you've done, from being a chemist to being a disc jockey to being involved in sports, tell me about your single best moment, and be very descriptive. Put the listeners there with you. So I need to know what you were doing specifically, when it was located, and date and time.
Well, my single best moment possibly was followed by my single worst moment.
Well, because I'm going to ask you about that too. If you want to go from the best to the worst, or the worst to the best, you can do it.
So of course, I learned to fly in graduate school, and I fell in love with flying, and it was just, yeah, it's just a passion inside of me. And because I love science and math, I always dreamed of being an astronaut. And my dad worked on the Titan missile rockets. He worked at United Technology Center, UTC down in Coyote near Morgan Hill.
Okay.
They did all the missile testing and stuff like that there. We watched the Apollo program. I was in front of the TV when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, and it was just a huge dream of mine to become an astronaut. But I didn't really think that I had the qualifications to be an astronaut. And so it turned out that one of my friends, one of my colleagues in graduate school, who was a couple, 3 years behind me, she also became a pilot and also was skydiving with us. She applied to NASA and became an astronaut, and she went up on up on the shuttle, and I went to her launch, and I thought, well, heck, if Mary Ellen could do it, I could do it. So, which is so much the case for everyone, but especially for women. We need role models, right? We need an example to show us that we can do it. And so while I was at Novellus, right after I first joined Novellus, I got sent to Albuquerque to do a startup, and I ended up being in Albuquerque for like a month. And I didn't even know I was going. I had gone to a conference in San Diego and packed for that, and then I got shipped from San Diego to Albuquerque, and so I had to go buy clothes even to do this job. And I knew the deadline for applying to be an astronaut was coming up. And I finally finished up the job and was able to come home, and I worked really hard to complete that application and get it in to NASA. And it's a big, long application and requires letters of reference and all that stuff. It's kind of one of those life story applications. It's not just an application.
Got it.
And then I waited, and I remember in early October, one day in early October that year, I get this letter in the mail from NASA. And, it's one of those things where you just kind of hold up the envelope. It's like, well, should I open it? Like, all your hopes and dreams are like contained in this envelope. And so I opened it, and it was a letter inviting me down to NASA to interview to be an astronaut.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I still have that letter.
I bet you do.
Yeah, and that was pretty much one of the most exciting days of my life, was to get that call.
We get it. We get it completely. So, but you earlier in this discussion, you said it came right after one of your worst days. So go
No,
back
it
to
came
stuff.
here before one of my worst days. So,
Oh,
so I will tell
tell me
you.
about your worst day.
So let me tell you about the interview process.
Okay.
So I get to go down to NASA and down to Houston, and it starts out with, and the way it works is they bring in, at least when I interviewed, which was in '95, they brought in 120 people that year in groups of 20. So they
Okay.
take all the applicants, all the thousands of applicants, and they rank order them, and they bring in the first 20, then they bring in the next 20, then they bring in the next 20. So I was in the first group of 20.
Okay.
And I was one of 3 women
Okay.
in the group, and one of 5 PhDs, the rest of them. And I had more flight time than anybody in the group,
Okay.
because I fly small airplanes, and
Got it.
yeah, and the military pilots, they just don't get that much flight time.
Okay.
So so the first day they bring you in, they do all this testing, they take your blood, and then they do all this IQ testing and testing of who you might be like and stuff, and then throughout the process they do all kinds of physical tests, treadmill tests. They do some unusual tests where they put you into a personal rescue sphere, and you're in a fetal position to fit in there. They've got you monitored with heart monitors, and make sure you're not claustrophobic, right? I fell asleep. Definitely not claustrophobic.
You fell asleep. I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, and they fit you. They measure all your joint angles and strengths to make sure that you can be in a spacesuit and work the spacesuit in space, and that you'd fit in the seat of the Soyuz, because they were planning missions with Russia to the space station, and you have to be able to be returned by the Soyuz, and they do a 4-hour interview with current and former high-ranking NASA officials and astronauts.
Okay.
You tell your life story, and then Thursday night they have this sort of little cocktail party at a local beer joint, and we're there. They just want to see how you mingle and socialize, because they don't want to spend 6 months on the space station with you and figure out they can't stand you, right? So they want to know that somebody they can spend a bunch of time with. And I had, just prior to doing that interview, I had learned to fly helicopters, and I got my helicopter rating, and the week before I left for NASA, I borrowed a friend's Bonanza, and it was the day that I got my helicopter rating. I borrowed my friend's Bonanza to go pick up a part at Portland International Airport, and I had an engine fire on takeoff, and I landed the plane on fire. 5 fire trucks and 2 emergency vehicles, and it shut down Portland International Airport and made the local news. And so that was one of the stories I told during my interview process. So that night at the bar, when we were all standing around with all the potential astronaut candidates, one of the guys from the board says, all you big military pilots and all your stories, and she has the best story, pointing to me, right?
Yeah.
So I figured that I had a pretty good chance of getting in, because I was pretty unique among the pool, but it turned out I have a vision defect, and I couldn't pass one of the vision tests. And so the Friday of that week, I found out that I don't see like everybody else sees, that I actually have a vision defect, and I have made up for it through my whole life.
Were you aware of it, or was it just so normal to you that you moved it out?
It was so normal to me that I did not know I had it. I don't have the same depth perception that everybody has. I couldn't pass their depth perception test.
Wow.
And I played softball. I played league softball. I played a tournament softball on weekends. I played infield. I played outfield. I had no idea I had this defect, but it turns out you can make up for this defect by the way you move your head, by light and dark, the size of an object, how the object moves in space. They're all other visual cues to where something is in space.
Yeah.
And so I was scrubbed from the pool of being an astronaut, and I was pretty devastated to find out.
I can completely understand that, because from your point of view, you overcame the problem, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was crushed because being down there felt like this was the perfect workplace and the perfect job for me. So it turned out that they hired 7 people out of my group of 20. 7 of them went on to be astronauts. And you never know why things happen in your life. But it turned out that 3 of those 7 were on the Columbia when it burned up.
Ouch.
So it could well have been that I was one of those.
Damn. So I was getting ready to ask you.
They were in my pool. I knew them. We kept in touch. In fact, one of them came out to visit me while I lived in Portland.
I was getting ready to ask you what good came out of that, but I think you've already answered that.
Yeah. So
you're still alive.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a great experience. I got to watch a shuttle launch from inside a mission control, sitting next to John.
How many people can say that?
Yeah.
Maybe 200?
Yeah. Sitting next to John Young, the man who drove the vehicle on the moon. And yeah, and in fact, he talked to me about one of the stories I told about density altitude after the interview. He talked to me quite a bit, and I met a number of really amazing people there. So it was a great experience overall, but it went from the pinnacle to the to the worst possible.
I understand completely.
So
if you had a message to deliver to the day that you graduated from high school, looking back, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to believe in myself, because I think that is the most important thing for us as humans, for our own self-satisfaction, self-love, to be able to achieve and do things that we want to do. It's so important to believe in yourself. And for me, it seemed like it came over time as I set goals for myself and achieved goals, as I learned to fly, that sort of stuff. But I would say that had I believed in myself even more earlier, I could have done even more. And so I think for young people, the most important thing is to believe in yourself.
Got it.
And go out and try it. I mean, when I came back from NASA, I had a group of friends that I'd go flying with on Saturday mornings. Every Saturday morning we meet in the hangar and we go fly out to breakfast someplace, rain or shine. And if it was raining, we'd drive to the local place to have breakfast. But so I show up in the hangar after my interview, and all my buddies have their backs turned to me. And I'm like, what's going on? They all turn around at the same time, and they're wearing those 3D glasses, the one with the red and the green.
Mm-hmm. They love you.
They love me. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
if you had a message to deliver to every inhabitant of planet Earth, what would it be?
Every inhabitant?
Yeah, we're talking to the whole world. This podcast is going to wind up around the planet.
Holy cow. Well, I guess I'd have to say enjoy your life because we only get one of those. And I think it's a good thing to keep in mind every day. Make sure you're doing the things that you love to do. And if you're not loving what you're doing, then you better figure out how to change it because
Either change it to the point that you love it or do something else, or is that
that's
what you're
right.
talking
Yeah, and a lot of it's your attitude, right? I mean, too. But I agree. There's some things that we just don't love. So. Um,
about? Got it. So I want to take a few minutes just between you and I because we're friends. You are one of the most amazing people that I've ever known. And I want you to know that, and I want to acknowledge that to the whole world, because when I listened to your story, and I've heard parts of this before, I had no idea that you were almost an astronaut. That's an AA.
That's like it's just not good unless it's hand grenades and horseshoes.
It's a great story. It's extremely motivational. I'm sure that the listeners to this podcast are going to be glad that they took the time to spend with you. Is there anything else that you'd like to communicate, whether it's to the whole world or just to the aviation audience or to little girls who are somewhat interested in chemistry and a little bit afraid of flying? What would you tell them?
Well, actually, I'd like to talk about a little bit for a moment about role models because I think role models are so important, and I think that each of us doesn't really realize the influence we have on each other and others. I know that in my life, when I was going to graduate school, I didn't feel like I could have a career and a family.
Right.
At the same time, I had a career and I didn't end up having a family. But then we see many examples of women who are in very high power positions having both careers and families. Okay. And I think, for me, that's like, wow, I wish somebody was like that when I was younger. I would have might have changed my life.
Got it.
As an airshow professional, I get to meet with lots of kids. I always take the time to try to talk to them. I ask them what they want to be when they grow up, just get their little minds thinking about, what it is they might want to be and stuff. And I've gotten letters back from young women saying, hey, I met you at an air show. You probably don't remember me, but you signed an autograph for me. And look, now I'm in college and I'm studying aviation and I'm becoming a pilot. And I think, and something that maybe was so insignificant to me, not that it wasn't significant, but I meet hundreds of kids, had a big impact on somebody else. And I always try to remind these young women that they're also role models for the people who are younger than them or people who are around them. And I think it's so important how we behave with other people, and to always try to be encouraging and gosh, friendly.
Yeah.
So
friendly is a good key, huh? Yeah. There's no reason to be miserable and have a crappy attitude. It's your
So somebody once asked me what I want people to remember about me. And I said, just remember that I was a nice person. Not that I was like the best flyer or, a good chemist or successful in business or whatever, but just remember that I'm a nice person. That's what I want to be remembered for. And so I think it really is important for us all to have role models, and it's important for us to remember that we are role models for each other. And I guess that's what I want to say.
So, who are some of your role models now?
Oh goodness. Now, I'll just say that I've learned so much from so many people. In in business, some of the vice presidents in our corporation who were gruff and mean and intimidating, I still learned a ton from. I had this boss who would refuse to see me, so I'd wait outside his office for hours until his last meeting ended, and he had to see me. And I learned so much from him, grudgingly maybe, but in the end we respected each other and became mutual friends, and then in the flying world, so many people have helped me. Wayne Hanley taught me to fly aerobatics. He's one of the people I most admire for just being a person and who he is and his flying abilities. Bill Stein helped teach me to fly the Stearman. Patty Wagstaff is certainly a role model for all of women in aviation. She's just amazing, and she continues to help women come up through the ranks in aviation, supporting women. And it's funny, not all women support women. Women are very competitive.
You don't have to explain it. I completely get it.
Yeah, but Patty's not that way. She really supports the women, and gosh, I'm sure there are more that I could list off. If it's sort of hard to do this extemporaneously. Okay. But
no problem.
I admire my husband. He's a very smart guy, and he really digs in to stuff and details. And we're in the middle of beginning a remodel, and we've been working on the plans for it for the last 9 months. And the contractors whose business this is supposed to be rely on him to do the plan checking. He's like, well, this window isn't right, or this isn't right. And
which of the companies, where did you meet your husband?
I met him at Novellus. So when I came to work at Novellus for Rick Hill, who was a CEO, who was previously the general manager at Tektronix, Jeff was at Novellus. He ran engineering at Novellus. And in fact, when I ran the tungsten group, I had engineers that worked for me, mechanical engineers that worked for me, and they would have to do design reviews with my husband because Jeff ran all of engineering, and so they sort of dotted line into his organization. And
so, is your husband into flying?
Yes, he is now. He is. But I'll tell you that story in just a moment. So anyways, they would be terrified to go meet with him because he really knew his stuff, and he would call them on the carpet if they hadn't thought through some dimension or some material property, or
got it.
They did their homework before they went to meet with them. So Jeff always said that I don't need to learn to fly because I have a perfectly good pilot, meaning me.
Yeah.
But you may know I have a small fleet of airplanes.
I absolutely do know that.
And they need to be serviced and stuff. They need to be ferried places, and so it'd be handy to have a second pilot in the family. And when Jeff went to retire from Novellus, and he was an executive vice president in the company, the boss's secretary called me up and said, "Oh, we're thinking of giving him a gold watch for his retirement gift." And I'm like, "Don't give him a gold watch. Give him flying lessons."
Like I said, you are amazing.
Don't give him something he can have in his drawer or wear on his wrist. Give him something he can do. So in front of about 250 people, he got a gift certificate to learn to fly. And of course, me being me, I wouldn't have him learn in like a Cessna 150. He had to learn in a tail dragger. And when you're just learning, you don't know the difference, that it's much harder. I mean, just seems like that's how hard it is to learn. And so every time he'd go back into the office, because he was on a wind down program from his job. Every time I go back in the office, they would say, "Oh, so how are those flying lessons going?" So of course he had to take the flying lessons, and so he learned to fly about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, and he has over 1,000 hours now, mainly from chasing me around to air shows. He has 2 of his own planes, and he has a Cirrus that he flies around, and he is supremely competent at flying that airplane and flying it in the soup down to minimums, because he's just kind of that kind of tech kind of guy. And and then he has a Cub, a Carbon Cub that he flies in the backcountry. He's a big off-road dirt bike guy. And so that just appeals to him to have the big tires and land in cow pastures and trips and stuff like that. So, and he's gotten quite good with that. We go out flying. So of course nobody wants to ride him back. So we had to buy a second one. So we have 2 of those, and he took another guy in the airport for a ride, and so he bought one. So there's 3 of us. We go out and we go out on weekends and go play in the cow pastures and fly up the rivers and chase coyotes and do all the things we're probably not supposed to do, but we do. And
you do it anyway. You'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission, right?
That's right. And yeah, and have some fun with it. So I think I've been very, very lucky in my life to be in the right place at the right time, to be successful. I joined this industry, the semiconductor equipment industry, right as it was exploding. So I joined Novellus in '96, I believe. You know, and we had a big explosion in 2000, right? And it's just steadily grown because because the need for semiconductor is ever increasing. You know, every new phone you get has more chips in it. Every computer, every car, every toy. I mean, everything in our lives has silicon in it, and so it will continue to be a growing industry. And we still hold stock in the company that we retired from, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing.
So the reason I'm pausing is because you froze for a second.
Oh, okay.
All right. So anyway, our time for this podcast has come to an end. Is there anything that you, thinking back, that you'd want to cover, that you want to tell everybody in the world about?
Boy, I don't know. I think we've talked about so many things.
Yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering it. Now, but I have something that I want to say. You may have, this is to the audience, you may have thought that I was being a little bit weird when I told her this lady is the most amazing person I've ever met. But now you know why I believe that way. I've never met somebody has as much confidence as you do and has the spirit that you do. And I love it. I love the fact that you grew up as a tomboy, because you know my wife Julie, and she's the same way. She always had souped up cars and always raced the boys, and so there's a lot of similarities. So you know that you know why I love Julie. It's the same reason that I love you. It's just that you have this huge, constantly expanding, adventurous spirit that we all should have. You know, if I could go back and tell myself at 5 years old, that's what I'd say. Just do it, try it. You know, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Right.
You know, you're just going to learn something.
Yep.
It's a failure.
Yep, I think just keep trying new things, and you know, life is a grand adventure. It really is. and gosh, I went from being a vice president in a $1.5 billion corporation to being an airshow pilot. You can always reinvent yourself.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I feel like I cut you off a little bit when you started to talk about when I wanted.
I don't even remember what I was going to talk about. But
Well, we'll do that when you do remember it. We'll do this again sometime.
okay,
How's that sound?
sure. I'm sure there's more stories to be told.
Knowing you in another couple of weeks, I'm gonna hear about your remodel, and it's probably be a great story.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
So as always, I enjoy every minute I get to spend with you. I learn new things about you every day, and it just makes my love for you to grow because you're such an amazing person.
Thank
And
you very much, Tom.
I gotta keep saying that. So
Thank you.
this is the end of today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it.